Hi, I'm Heather, and I'm going to move right into answering the questions for the Module 2 discussion. My vision on ethics is similar to the definitions. There's a lot of definitions of ethics, I feel like, that we've read so far in the book, but it's very similar to that found in the text. Page 44 talks about how determining goodness is not always black and white. And this is true because I think we all have our own set. I know that we all have our own set of morals and values. I have certain friends that I know in a million years wouldn't do specific things. And then I have friends who like bending the rules a little bit, which is kind of funny because it's funny how we can kind of define someone else's ethics and predict how they will respond in certain situations just by knowing them. Or, I mean, I think we make assumptions too about people as far as what their ethics may be, what rules they may follow. I think that also, like, when you see somebody on the street or something, you might assume that they don't follow a certain amount of ethical guidelines or codes, and they may break the law, which those two, ethics and laws coincide. So I think that we can kind of judge people on that too. Ethos means the nature or disposition of culture, and I think that culture is a prominent part in what governs our laws and our common sense. Taking intercultural communications made me realize that a lot more. I'll move to number 2. My views of ethics have completely changed as I've gotten older. When I was younger, I used to be okay copying people's homework. I don't do that anymore. No. It's kind of hard to copy homework in classes like this anyways because it's a lot more challenging. But even if I could, I wouldn't do it. Not only does it make school miserable because you have no idea what's going on, but it just isn't right and it just feel bad. I mean, that's why I stopped doing it, because I wasn't getting as much of a personal gain out of it, because I started becoming a better person. I don't know, getting older, whatever that has to do with learning my lesson multiple times. And I hate lying to people in general, so I just don't do it anymore. It's not necessary, in my opinion. I honestly don't think I would even lie to a cop if I was, okay. I don't speed, so I wouldn't get pulled over. And also, I don't talk to the cops without a lawyer present. That's the other aspect of it. But I think that people, like a cop would honor and respect your truth. And if he thought you were being authentic or she being authentic, they'd probably be more apt to get you out of a ticket than if you were clearly blatantly lying to them. So for selfishness or selfish reasons or not, I think that being straightforward and practicing ethical values in everything you do is important. It's so by common sense ethics, I saw common sense, it's one word instead of two, and how it's defined in the book. Page 55 talks about it, and it's definitely my common sense specifically has got varied as I've gotten older, and the culture within my friendships has become a lot more ethical, and that's changed. Like, I hang out with really good people who focus on becoming better versions of themselves, and it's not acceptable advice that my friend and the people I hang out with now would be like, yeah, cheat on that paper, make it easier on yourself, or even drinking and driving. Like, all of those things used to be a lot more acceptable in my friendship group and the culture that I was around than they are now. Now it's completely unacceptable. So that's definitely changed. I'll move to number 3. A large ethical issue that I've seen in more than one environment is the manipulative and exploitive communication sort of activity, I guess I would say. Page 57 defines it as using demagoguery or patronizing, or is, if someone's condescending to others. I've had a very sometimes passive aggressive, but usually aggressive boss, and she'd say rude comments, be mean. Everyone was scared of her, and it was pretty normal. So it was kind of an accepted traditional thing that she would be mean to new people, which was really weird. But I told everything to my other boss, that they were co-owners, and it changed for like a month, but I eventually quit. Things weren't handled correctly in that situation, obviously. But it was so toxic that and it happened gradually, so it would like seem normal. But anyways, my consequence is that my happiness for the day was kind of dictated by her mood. Another ethical act is deceptive behavior, which also fits into the book's definition of what my old boss was doing. She'd use derogatory comments and start being nice when she wanted something. And some consequences of that ethical behavior, and both of those actually, is a mistrust, which is trust is really hard to get back once it's broken, lost reputation, lawsuits. You can tell if it's handled by transparency in the media and to all stakeholders. So anybody that was involved there, like just admitting that you're wrong is really a big way to handle things. The definitions for the behaviors that they align with the article we read, manipulative and exploitive. The CEO in charge developed a public image of responsibility, promoting social responsibility, and I consider that to be an abuse of power and authority. That was found on page 2 of the document. Deceptive, all of these definitions are found on page 57 in our text, all of the little behavior definitions. But sending ambiguous messages when they asked them to change the label, talking about the risks, and instead it said, Vox is not a substitute for aspirin for cardiovascular risk prevention. I was on page 4. Being secretive. They hoarded information and didn't disclose deaths, which is terrible. Found that information on page 6, and how they asked for the causes of patients' deaths to be changed so that concerns weren't raised. Completely unethical. Coerciveness. Page 3 talks about how Merck used science cells, and I think that falls into an abuse of power when they used that kind of stance on things, because science is a really high authority, and using that to do people is really wrong, because it should be there to benefit people, especially, but people believe science, they traditionally should. And then the catchy titles that they use to promote Vox's benefits in the titles of the studies. Destructive. They were very destructive. On page 5, they talked about how they threatened Dr. Singh, who worked at Harvard, I believe. They threatened to tell his bosses how he was bashing them. And then they said that physicians and researchers all over the country were threatened and pressured. So that's pretty terrible to do. And then I'll go to number 5, moving on from all of those very unethical dilemmas that were cited in the text. 5, I think that the ethical issues could have been addressed through transparency, as I said before. I feel like people can move forward when people stop being duplicitous and stop cheating and lying. I mean, it's just gets kind of out of hand and ridiculous, and eventually people stop believing anything you say. Like, they have lost all credibility, in my opinion, after reading that. But they could use Mattson and Buzzanell's feminist ethic model. It strives towards transforming values outside of traditional authoritative forms and ethical systems. And I think that, the people with money and that were highly profiting off of all of this, they were in positions of authority, and it changed everything. And it put a lot of people in danger, because money and the people who were controlling it had control over what was happening after that. The first step is to define the ethical dilemma. Second is to examine ethical values. They needed to do that. The third step is to apply ethical principle. Clearly needed to do that. And then the last step is to develop ethical solutions. And one thing that I took from the model that I really liked and wanted to mold this together with my answer is the book talks about on page, I think it's 59 that the actual model is on, but eliminating harm to those most vulnerable and reanalyzing the remaining alternatives, because a lot of people got hurt, people died, and I think that it's important to have other people that have, all of the benefits at their fingertips to make sure that they're not the ones making all of the decisions, because they're probably not always going to be in the best interest of everyone else. Thank you.